Bonsoir, welcome to today's interview with Greg Kuhn of Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Get Fat. My name is Sandy Levesque, coming to you from a very mahogany-esque room in Portugal, Europe. And I'm personally excited about this topic because you might already know if you've been following my posts and things for a while, or maybe you have no idea even who I am, but you've heard about this through Greg, so welcome whoever you are. But just very quickly, I used to be a political campaigner. I was campaigning for women's rights and had a great job actually. Was doing really well. Our campaign changed the law, and then suddenly I got really ill, and loads of different health problems all came at once. And I'd never really been the kind of person to get ill before, and so it was a huge wake-up call that something wasn't quite right. And it actually led me to completely change what I was doing. I left politics, left campaigning, went on to start working with the body, working as a fitness and dance instructor, and that really opened my eyes to the importance of actually taking care of yourself, not just always working or always putting. Even if you believe in a cause, if you're not taking care of you, you can't really help if you're in a hospital or if you're in bed ill or if you're, it doesn't even have to be illness. It could be if you're overweight and just don't feel good in your body. That's also an issue. So I'm really excited to have you on the show, Greg. Do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello, hello. I know who Sandy is, by the way. Your introduction, Sandy, and whether you're joining us today in arrears because you're watching this on YouTube, or you found the link through Sandy, or you found the link through me, I hope that you have fun. Sandy and I have continued these conversations because we have a lot of fun with them, and we've heard from some people saying that they have also had fun. So I think as long as we continue to get that sort of feedback, that we should continue. And I said to Sandy, hey, if we're going to do this, let's talk about things that are challenging. Let's talk about issues that people really want to know. And that's not to say that on these particular topics. So we started out and we just talked about quantum physics and the law of attraction kind of in general, and how we create our material reality. Sandy was nice enough to invite me to talk about that. And then I sent her some I started blackmailing her, saying, you have to have me back on. And she said, oh, gosh, okay. And I said, let's talk about, tough stuff, or let's talk about stuff people might be hesitant to address, or things that, that's a giant mug of coffee, or things that people really are curious about, right? Let's not talk about fluffy things, although fluffy things are good too, like dogs and cats, obviously. My dog is here, Sam, right beside me. So the next one we had was about money. And now today, Sandy said, hey, let's take a break from anything challenging or difficult or controversial. Let's talk about weight and our body and the law of attraction and quantum physics, and how we create things. And of course, I'm saying that in jest. Obviously, weight and body is a huge issue for so many people. And are there ways that we can use this information to transform our body, our self-image, our weight? And I say absolutely, and I'm really glad we get to talk about this topic. And one other thing, that's not to say that each of these hangouts closes the book on any of these subjects, because hearing from you, the folks who join us on these calls, we may find we want to go back, maybe revisit some of these topics with people joining us in the hangout, or based on questions that people send us. But we're going to have a lot of fun today talking about this topic.
Yeah, and I just want to thank anyone watching who's sent us in feedback from the other hangouts, because we've been getting a lot of messages actually, and I find it I really appreciate that personally, because I know it's really easy on the internet to just kind of watch things or read a blog and just kind of go away again. and not leave a comment, even if you did find it useful. I've done that myself in the past. And when someone actually takes a couple of minutes to say, this really helped me, a few people actually emailed me straight away and were like, oh, thank you so much for this hangout you did on money, or the first one we did. It does mean something. It's not just kind of quickly read and then forgotten about. So I just wanted to thank you if you're one of those people. And let us know if you have questions for today's hangout, if you happen to be here live, because then we can actually answer them. Don't be shy. And sometimes it's not even just about being shy. It's actually sometimes when we don't necessarily, we're kind of not really willing to go out of our comfort zone. It's easier just to sit back and be invisible. And once I was saying on a hangout, don't be shy, and my friend who I was co-hosting with, she said, Sandy, I don't think it's being shy. I think it's actually not being willing to receive extra insight and extra, facilitation specifically for that person, and that often it's easy just to kind of check out a little bit. So if you're here live, give us some questions, is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, can I piggyback on what you're saying? That
Yeah.
one, everyone listening to this knows this is true. Usually, when someone asks a question, don't you say, "Well, I'm really glad they asked that question," or there's always somebody who's glad that somebody spoke up. And maybe I was, like you described, just for a second thinking, I ought to know this. Maybe I shouldn't ask the question. And then also, like you said, you are worthy of joining us. You are worthy of being heard. You are more than worthy of those things. In fact, if Sandy and I are special, if we're of value to you, if we are, if we're contributing to your life in any way, really, it's us who need to thank you, because you are deciding that we're going to be able to play that role in your life today, and we don't take it for granted, and certainly I don't take it for granted that anyone allows me to be of value in their life. It's so, as Sandy said, when people share that with me, whether it's through questions or sometimes complaints or comments or just a, hey, way to go, really enjoyed it, it really fills me with joy to know that I'm being honored with that decision on your part. To say, hey, I'm going to let Greg Kuhn be somebody valuable in my life today, or I'm going to let Sandy be somebody valuable in my life today. So thank you in advance, if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it, actually. I love that. And it makes me think of the first thing I wanted to ask you, actually, Greg, which was, and I just want to say, Greg's a best-selling author and has done a whole series of books on why quantum physicists do not insert something. So why they do not get fat, or why they did not fail, why they have abundance. And I just thought it was I love the title, Do Not Get Fat, Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Get Fat. And I wanted to ask you, Greg, how can you say that so confidently?
Yeah, good question. I've often been asked about this subject, especially when that first book came out, and I just want to give a disclaimer and say that those titles are obviously there's some tongue-in-cheek, because I think there probably are some quantum physicists who are not happy with their weight. However, because of the new paradigms that we're having the opportunity to work with from quantum physics, we no longer have to, we're not forced to experience a body or any other material experience that doesn't serve us and that's not aligned with our desires. And we're so lucky to be a generation that's emerging with a really clear blueprint about how to change what we see and experience, including our body, including our coffee mugs.
Especially when this is actually tea.
Tea.
I'm very British.
Oh. course.
Yeah. So, it's you can never actually. There's all kinds of different mug sizes in the house I'm in, and I always take the hugest mugs because you can never have too much tea.
Well,
um,
yeah, and you don't want to drink coffee. It's kind of late to drink coffee, I guess, too, right?
well, I actually don't drink it, and this
Oh,
is
you don't drink it
actually
at all?
on the. Well, yeah, I used to, and then one day I just realized that my body didn't like it because I just never felt that good afterwards. So I just stopped, and I feel much better actually. So
Oh, good for
um,
you.
yeah, and actually, so when you're talking about using the ideas of quantum physics
Hmm.
to, if someone's watching this and they're thinking, okay, I need to lose weight, I'd like to lose weight, what the bleep can quantum physics contribute to that? What's how are the two connected? Because for some people, um, we understand the idea. Yes, you create your reality. The way you think about things
Right.
affects the way those things are. But how are you suggesting people can do that with their body shape, with taking care of their body, with weight loss?
That that question, obviously, we're here to talk about today. I do want to start by saying this. Um, and I think the baseline for any discussion regarding these new paradigms uh, and how to use them, how to take advantage of them, how to benefit from them, always begins with this statement: everything is information. And I want to illustrate that in a unique way, uh, utilizing a really cool a story that I heard on National Public Radio the other day. Before I do that, though, I want to say this: everything really is information. And really, that's all that it is until there's an observer there to assimilate it and give it meaning and value, to give it relevance, to give it context. And like I said, I want to illustrate that in a moment. Let me say this. In my experience as an author, I have found that there are three types of information. Make sure there three is up there. There are three types of information that people, me included, tend to take most personally. And when I say take personally, I mean think of it this way: if I'm in a bad mood today, and I meet someone for the first time, and they see me and they say, "Wow, that guy is a real grouch," and I say, "Well, that's actually not accurate. You're actually attributing something to me based on an experience you had that's not consistent with how I might usually behave and what my usual attitude is." We have a very human and very natural tendency to identify with the information we are experiencing. Uh, First of all, to identify with it jibes with what our eyeballs tell us and what our ears tell us about how the world works, right? It jibes with the old science that saw the world and all the material objects in it as pre-existing entities that had no relationship with us, that were there whether we were there or not, that existed prior to our presence and will always exist, right? That's the old science. And when we personalize some of this information, to wrap this up. It's our body, our relationships, and our money or our financial situation. I have found that those three pieces of information, uh, people, and like I said, me included, have tended to take those most personally. We and in relation to the body, and I know, Sandy, you have experienced this too. People can become very defensive when their body and how it's created and their relationship with it is questioned. And I think, and the same thing goes often with relationships and with money. And I think a lot of that is because when we say that we are contextual creators, meaning we have a consciousness and we are contextually creating the material world, including our bodies and everything in it. I think for many people there's a sense of blame, because if we're unhappy with our body, if I call myself fat, or I call myself ugly, or I call myself undesirable, in any manner, that's obviously, one, very painful. We all know that. And two, when we hear information like this, it's very natural for us to hear that, and it feels like a finger of blame pointed at us. They're saying, wait a second, there's this very painful part of my life, and now you're telling me that, that I create it? It's pretty natural for something like that to make us angry or defensive. And so that's my caveat, is as we talk about this, is to step back and to see everything as information is a wonderful freeing act. And it also is very, very accurate. In fact, it's what quantum physics asks us to do, because that is the actual state of the material world. Can I illustrate this concept of everything being information? Right now, is this a good time to do that? And then we can talk about how it works with the body?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. I've talked about this concept many ways and written about it many ways, and it's been a fun thing to continue to learn about and to learn how to explain. Well, I heard an NPR story, National Public Radio story, and it was a story about color. Okay, and of course the person who created the story was investigating, what is color? Is it even real? What does it mean? How is it created? And the scientist that was being interviewed for the story, who is an expert on color and has written a book about color, says that, and I think that this will make sense to everybody, color is actually a combination of the natural qualities of the object or the thing, right, combined with the light present. Okay, so it's a combination, the natural qualities of the thing and the light that's present. But the most important aspect of color is the observer, who assimilates that information and gives it relevance and context and creates it, right? So there's natural qualities of a thing or a material object. There's light that's present, but me, you, the observer, are the linchpin, because we take those two, and isn't it easy to see? Those are pieces of information. The apple, let's say, is a piece of information. The light that's present is a piece of information. Me, the observer, takes those two pieces of information, the energy, the information, and I assimilate them into a color, which may be red or orange or yellow, depending, or green, depending upon the apple that I have, right? So information, I, being the observer, am the linchpin. I assemble it. I give it context. I give it meaning. Essentially, if I weren't here as the observer, these things would be inert, meaningless. Without observers, these things are just pieces of information. And let me illustrate it this way. See this?
Yeah.
Can you read that, Sandy?
42.
42. Now, would you agree with me that this is a piece of information?
Yeah.
Yes. Does it have any relevance?
Then my brain tries to find maybe we're talking about something that they talked about in 1942. No is the answer to that.
Yeah. Oh, and I should say, these aren't trick questions. I'm not trying to be clever. It's very straightforward, and I hear what you're saying, usually when we're asked questions, but nothing tricky. The number 42 is a piece of information, right? And there's no denying that. We all see that. However, it has no meaning. It has no relevance. Let's switch. Can you read that?
Yeah. It says, what was Jackie Robinson's uniform?
And that's supposed to be a number.
Tag.
I ran out of room.
Oh.
So it's supposed to be what was Jackie Robinson's uniform number? Now, do you
Oh,
know
number. Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, do you know who Jackie Robinson was, by the way?
No.
Okay, and I knew when I wrote this down, this is for an American audience. Jackie Robinson is a very famous figure in America because he was the first African American to play in Major League Baseball. He broke the color barrier and integrated Major League Baseball, so he's a very well-known figure. And in fact, Major League Baseball has retired his number permanently for every single team in honor of that historic, event, breaking the color barrier, which in America is very significant. Okay, so would you agree that this question is a piece of information?
Yeah, and a question at the same time.
Yeah, right. It's a question, right? It's a piece of information. Now, if you don't know who Jackie Robinson is, or if you don't know what his uniform number is, do you have a lot of context for this question?
None.
None, right? Now, and for all our listeners who know who Jackie Robinson is, let's pretend that you don't know who Jackie Robinson is. Yet this probably has a little more relevance and makes a little more sense than the first piece of information. I'm sure we can agree with that because we see that, oh, this is a question I may not know. Now, let me tell you, guess what Jackie Robinson's uniform number was?
Ah, okay, 42.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I thought you didn't know who Jackie Robinson was. His uniform number was 42, right? So
Yeah.
now we kind of scoot back so they're both here. Now these two pieces of information is it true to now say that they both have an incredible context and relevance and significance and meaning and value?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, you may not care, about Jackie Robinson or what his uniform number is, but certainly now, because we've put these two things side by side, we've made them relevant and significant and meaningful and valuable, and there's a context for them, right? So, what was the most important? Now, here's my question, and once again, I'm not trying to be tricky or, be a smarty pants or anything like that, but let me ask you this. What was the most important thing that happened that turned these two pieces of information into something meaningful and significant with context and value? What would you say?
It was you sharing the context to the first question about the story of Jackie Robinson, him breaking that barrier.
I absolutely would not disagree with you at all, because once you saw these two pieces of information, you and then heard the story and you saw how they fit together, right? I don't disagree with you at all. I also want to ask you to step back, like, mentally, spiritually, energetically, take one step back, and the most important thing that gave these two pieces of information context, it wasn't the question, it wasn't the number, it wasn't even my story and the additional information I provided. It was Sandy assimilating it. It was these are two inert, meaningless pieces of information in a sense, until Sandy saw it, observed it, assimilated it, assembled it, and gave it meaning and context. Now, that concept, I realize, somebody could hear that and say, whoop-de-doo, okay, so that's what we do. The significance of that concept, though, is immense, because this concept applies to everything in the world. There's nothing in the world that has pre-existing meaning, context, significance, value until we observe it, until we assimilate it, until we assemble it, until we define it. And there's the freedom, okay? Sir Martin Rees, I may have said this before in a previous hangout, but it's appropriate here. Sir Martin Rees, he's British. He was the former Astronomer Royal of Great Britain in the British Royal Society. He says the universe is only here because there are observers to observe it. That without us, without the consciousness possessing time-space events, because that's what we are, there is no universe, there is no context, there is no meaning, there is no relevance. It's just a bunch of energy. It's just a bunch of information, okay? So, how does that apply to our body? Am I saying that, oh, we can just start thinking differently and walk over to the mirror and boom, we're slim? Not exactly. Not exactly. But does it have context? Does it have relevance? Is what I'm sharing so far? I just want to make sure. Does it seem clear? I'm not trying to be overly elementary or simplified, but I just want to make sure before we move on, because that's an important concept to get our hands around before we start talking about our body.
Yeah, no, it does make perfect sense. You're basically saying that nothing has its own. Like, the thing I've sometimes found is that when people say everything is just particles, and that, like, when you start reading a lot about quantum physics,
right,
you see people even saying that everything is like a big hologram, that it's only the way we see things that affects how they are, and that they can actually be a whole number of things. It's just that at some point we decided they were going to look like this or look like that. And so with our body, sometimes it can be difficult to connect that, because sometimes the body just seems like such a real flesh and bones thing. Do you know what I mean? It can be hard to see how that works.
Yeah.
But I actually have a real life example of what you're talking about, Greg. Really quickly,
Sure.
It is that I actually, a few years ago, I stopped dancing. I love to dance, and I had stopped for a while, and I was doing lots of running, and I was working a lot, and I found that I got overweight, not hugely, but I had always been quite slim, and suddenly my face was getting really round. My clothes, I had to change size, and I was obviously gaining weight. And for about 5 years, even though I thought about it all the time, nothing happened. I changed my diet several times. I would go running more because I was doing a lot of jogging. It was my main form of exercise. I remember looking in the mirror and taking the fat I didn't like, and being like, oh, this is so annoying, and nothing would change it. Yeah. And then when I got very ill, as I was describing right at the start, I went through this very intense time for a few weeks, where I just decided to completely change the way I saw the world, and that actually meant, by extension, how I saw my body, even though it wasn't what I was focusing on.
Sure.
But I stopped focusing on all the problems that I was constantly focusing on at that time, because I used to wake up with the radio of the news, BBC News, and my job was to be on top of the news, to be sending out press releases, to be answering questions from journalists, and I was living and breathing the news all the time, and problems, raising awareness about violence against women. And I had this turning point where I decided I'm going to stop focusing on negativity and making my life be about negativity, and just let go of all of it and focus on good stuff. And I felt my whole body started to feel lighter. And the most amazing thing happened, because it was about 8 weeks, it's about 20 pounds. I've worked it out because I've talked about this a couple of times before. I lost a huge amount of weight just like that, and I wasn't doing any. I stopped actually exercising. I started to do some dancing with a CD in the living room. I stopped having all these rules about what I was allowed to eat, what I wasn't allowed to eat. I just ate what I felt like, and I stopped being vegetarian because I had decided to become vegetarian a few years before that. And and my friends were like, what the hell happened to you? Your body's just completely changed shape.
Uh-huh.
And I've actually had that happen twice since then, when I've gone through a shift where I've changed the way I'm thinking about my life, and suddenly my body gets slimmer. It's like I always notice if I'm starting to feel a bit frustrated or something's not going right, it starts to show on my physical body. And I'm not saying that applies to everyone, but I've just noticed it with my own body. And so what you're saying really speaks to me, because I know that it was the way I was seeing everything that changed my body shape really dramatically. It was a big change. It wasn't just like, oh, I felt a bit slimmer. It was literally, I had to change my clothes because suddenly they were too big again. And
Yeah.
people were saying to me, wow, what did you do? Like, what are you, like, what diet are you on? And I was like, I'm not
Uh-huh.
doing a diet. I'm
Yeah.
just happy.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that's,
Yeah, and what you're sharing, and I want to say this and echo what you're sharing, and also say that if anybody is watching this and is displeased with her or his body in any way, uh, I completely understand the defensiveness that can rise up pretty quickly when we hear someone share what you're sharing, or even what I'm sharing too. I think that we an unpleasing body, a displeasing body, uh, can be for many people so painful and create so much suffering. And we could probably do a whole nother show about the reasons behind that. Should we subject ourselves to images, unnatural images of how people should look, and aren't we bombarded with those things? And I'm not making a political statement or a societal statement. However, regardless of how that unpleasantness and that displeasure has originated, uh, it for many people it becomes suffering. And when we suffer, because here's the thing, I think I may have shared before. My goal, my desire, my greatest desire, is for suffering to be optional. And the way that I know of to manifest that goal is to make sure that I take advantage of as many opportunities as I can to write about this information and share this information, because suffering as a link in an unbreakable chain, suffering as an inevitability, suffering as a human mental prison, that we can't escape from. That is a result of old science. That's a result of saying things are the way they are, and there's nothing I can do about it. And the freedom of what we're talking about right now is that suffering can become optional. And going back to the original topic, body and body displeasure, for whatever reason, has created an immense amount of suffering for people. And when we suffer because of these old paradigms that we were taught by well-intentioned people, I was taught the same things. I've had to learn these things just like everyone else, and I'm very grateful that I have had that opportunity. But when we suffer and don't know a way out of it, the only option, we only have two options that I'm aware of over the course of time. One is to blame other people, and the other is to blame ourselves, to say that we're bad, we're wrong, there's something wrong with us, right? Now that is a horrible thing for anyone to carry around. For me to say, if I'm displeased with my body, let's use an ugly word, okay? Let's say I call myself fat. Now that's an ugly word for me. Uh, I don't want to, in addition to feeling bad about that, to also say, well, Greg, you're fat because of there's something wrong with you, or because you're bad, or because you're not doing things right. So the outlet to that, until we learn about these new paradigms, is to point the finger at others and say, well, Sandy, you know what? You're just one of those lucky people. You were just born with the right genes. You've never had a weight problem. Look at you. Why are you even talking about this subject? How dare you? You don't know what it's like for me. And I'm not making fun of anybody when I say that. I hope that's apparent. Uh, I've actually have suffered because of my body in the past. Perhaps my suffering wasn't as great as others, but I don't think there's a lot of value in weighing suffering as if, well, I haven't suffered as much as you. That's a personal thing. When we say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, I've had enough, that's a personal decision. Somebody doesn't have to become 400 pounds to say, I'm tired of being unhappy with my body, right? And I want to go back, and I'm making some notes. I want to talk about, before we stop today, I want to talk about the big problems, the 2 or 3 huge problems with traditional methods of making our bodies the way we want them to be, to making our bodies desirable, and how those are created by old science, and how they feed that self-defeating, self-blaming paradigm. But I want to go back to something you said before. By the way, I agree with you. Many of us have been caught in the trap of defining ourselves by what's wrong with us, by defining ourselves with what we need to change, how we need to grow. In fact, I think sometimes self-help and self-empowerment groups can often lead people down that path of saying, I want to focus. I'm always focused on what I need to change about myself, and I want to change the focus around and say, let's be honest about our displeasure. Let's no longer deny it. Let's no longer sugarcoat it. Let's no longer pretend it's not there. And when we do that, let's get into the solution. Let's start defining ourselves by our growth, by aligning our beliefs with our conscious desires, and not by what's wrong with us. You mentioned the old, what quantum physics says about the insubstantialness of matter. How things are particles and there's a lot of empty space, and that's true. Yet, and you say, well, but my body is real, and this spare tire around my waist is real, or my chubby face is real, or whatever the case may be, right? If anybody thinks that the material world is not real, or that it's insubstantial and nothingness, I would invite you to take off your shoes and go outside and kick a rock. and you will find out that yes, all those things are true, and this is real, right? So let's not say that this body that I have, however displeasing or pleasing that it is on a spectrum, it is real. It is, it's what I have. It's what my consciousness uses as a vehicle to experience human life, and it really does exist. And the power that we have as creators, sometimes I think people are led to believe that the power we have is fantastic, in the sense that it's like we're the genie in the lamp that Aladdin brings forth. It is magical, and it is miraculous, and it is amazing. But it's not the power to pull out a stapler and change it into a bar of gold, by my thinking, right? That's not the kind of power that creators, which we all are, have. And by the way, we're all creators. We're all creating our body right now. Okay? We're giving it meaning, we're giving it value, we're giving it context, we're giving it significance. We're assembling it in that manner. There's nothing we can do about that. If you're listening to this, you have no choice in whether or not you're creating. That's what you're doing every single second that you're aware and here to observe. The only choice we have is, do we want to create unintentionally or intentionally? But those are the only two choices, or it's actually the only choice, right? Those two things. So what we're talking about is creating intentionally. And what we're talking about is learning new ways to assemble and give significance to the material world, including our body, right? In my book, I write about two things. Now, typically, Sandy, would you agree? I know, because you do a lot of active, and you teach exercise, and you do Zumba, and so movement, exercise, it can be a pretty important thing, right, to our body.
Oh, absolutely. I think if you're not moving on a regular basis, you you need to change that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I say. Mm.
I mean, most and anybody who wants to change her body is going to hear that message in some form or fashion, right? You need to move. You need to exercise. Well, usually we say exercise. I call it movement. I think it's movement. It's intentional movement, right? I think that just sounds better.
Yeah, and there's actually a school of thought which says that the word exercise, it kind of has its origins in exorcise. So it's like you're trying
Oh,
to
right.
get your body out, like and even that diet is the same, like diet.
Right.
So um yeah, and I just also want to say that there's a caveat to that I found, which is that not all movement is created equal, that each person has some kind of movement that really you just love and enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
and that if you're not doing that, your body won't respond to other kinds of movement as much as what I found with. I was craving dance, but I was making myself go jogging all the
Sure.
time,
Sure.
and actually that was causing harm to my body because I had problems with my joints, at a young age. So
Yeah.
it's like listening to our body is really important. That's kind of going off on another side
No.
track. So I want
No.
to
No. No.
you keep
That's not
going.
another track. That's not another track at all, Sandy, because you're talking about exactly what we need to talk about, in the sense that, and there's sort of another side of this coin too. Obviously, movement is important for any human being, whether or not she is trying to change her body, or maybe she's incredibly pleased with her body. Here is, and you talked about, some movement feels better, some movement, for certain people there's, movement that is more in line with them, with their body, with their state of being. But I will say this: movement in and of itself is information. Okay? Your body moving, any instructions you're following, and by the way, nobody's moving without following instructions, right? I mean, we can tune in to Sandy doing Zumba, and we can follow your instructions, right? But if I go take a walk around the block, I'm following instructions. I'm following the instructions I was given for how to walk. Now, that may have been a long time ago, but the instructions and the movement we do, it's information, right? And remember, the information itself is inert, right? It has no meaning and value. It is just information. And now think about this for a minute. I know we've all been trained to say, "Oh, I hate to exercise. Oh, exercising is hard. Oh, exercising is a pain in the butt. I don't want to make the time to exercise. I don't like it." And how many of us, when we feel like, "Hey, I want to change my body. I want to make it more pleasing," we go and we start to exercise, right? And all the while, I don't want to do this. I don't like it. I can't wait till it's done. Boy, I can't wait to get this over with. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that's done. I'll give you a good example. As a runner, when I first started, learning about these new paradigms, and I'd go out for a run, uh, I realized that I would always run in courses that have hills because that's a good cardiovascular uh, workout to go up the hill. Well, I'd find myself saying, "Oh, here comes that hill. Oh my gosh, I just got to get through this." And then when I got to the top of the hill, I'd say, "Thank goodness, I'm done with that hill. I didn't really enjoy that. It's over with." And I thought, wait a minute, what kind of context am I giving this movement? How am I defining it? Because is there a rule that says I must hate exercise? Is there a rule that says I must, whip myself in the back to make myself go exercise? Is there a rule that says I must beat myself up to make myself go exercise and that I can't enjoy it and it has to be grueling and then when I get done, oh, I'm so glad? No. Those are things that I've learned. Those are ways that I've learned to assimilate the information, okay? So I started saying to myself, you know what? Um, I could see this hill differently when I'm running. I could say to myself, hey, here comes a hill. This hill is this is an awesome opportunity for me to really get my body pumping. And that's what I'm out here to do. And I'm going to take advantage of it. And while I'm going up the hill, I'm like, oh wow, this is fun. This is a cool challenge. This is why I'm out here. I don't have to push myself like I'm an Olympic athlete, but I'm going to push myself as much as I feel motivated. And then when I get to the top of the hill, you know what I started saying to myself? Oh darn, the hill's over. Well, I can't wait for the next one.
About a reframe, yeah.
You know what I'm doing here, right? I'm telling myself a better feeling, believable story, okay? Now, I was already in the habit of running, so it was pretty easy for me, and I got some enjoyment out of running. So it was pretty easy for me to tell that story, which was a pretty darn good feeling story, right? But it was believable for me because I was already in the habit of running. But I will tell you this, until I started doing that, until I started being an intentional creator of the context, the meaning, the value, the significance, the relationship that I had to the information all around me. You know what? Running, I used to get pretty frustrated. I was a pretty avid runner, and I always looked in the mirror and said, you know what? How come I don't have a runner's body? You know, I still wanted to look. I felt good. I felt healthy, but I still wanted to look differently. I still wanted to look. I wanted to look more lean. And when I started being intentional about the meaning, the significance, the context, and the value of the movement I was doing, I started to see more of that. Now, it didn't happen overnight. It's like we can't turn a potato into a Mercedes Benz just by changing what we think, right? But it did happen because my beliefs about the movement started to change. And what I realized is that, you know what? I have the freedom, I have the ability to be intentional about all of the context, all of the significance, all of the meaning, all of the value of any movement I do. When I am in a building, that's I never take the elevator. Okay. Now, someone might say, well, that's a great practice for somebody who it's exercise. Well, when I am walking up flights of stairs, I love it. I like it. I say to myself the same thing that I said when I was running up those hills. I've learned. I believe it now. I say to myself, I flex the muscles in my legs and I say, this is wonderful. This is great. Thank you for this opportunity to move my body. I appreciate it. I don't want to be in the elevator. If somebody wants to take the elevator, I don't think they're foolish. I don't want to do it. I want to be doing this. I love this opportunity. Thank you for this opportunity. And no matter what it is, if any type of movement I'm doing, and most of the time I do remember, I have learned to tell myself always the best feeling, believable story about the movement and to enjoy it and appreciate it. I took my son to Chicago last weekend. We stayed on the near north side. We were downtown. It was a father-son weekend, and we did a ton of walking all through the downtown area. He was looking for some certain article of clothing, some shoes, and we We walked here, we walked there. I mean, we walked a ton, and I loved it. I never once wanted to take a bus or a cab or ride a bike. I just loved the opportunity. Okay, now this is what I'm referring to, right? So it doesn't. Does this mean that if I haven't been in the habit of moving, that I can jump right into a Zumba class where I'm sweating profusely and tell myself, I love this? Maybe not, okay? Because that might not be believable, okay? But I can certainly, even if I'm just beginning this process of being intentional about what I'm creating, I can begin to tell myself better feeling, believable stories about any movement I'm doing. It might just be a walk around the block, right? And I can say to myself, you know what? I'm grateful that my legs work and that I have this opportunity. I'm grateful that I've taken advantage of it today and I've made this decision and I feel good about it, and I don't have to worry about tomorrow. I don't have to beat myself up for all those days past where I didn't make any movement. I'm grateful I get this opportunity right now. This is good for me. This is a loving thing that I can do. Now that's a believable story, I hope, for anybody. But you know what? If you're in a really bad spot with beliefs about movement, maybe you don't get that positive right from the start. Maybe you start out by saying, I can believe that I can get out and take a walk around the block today, and it doesn't have to be that bad, and it won't be that bad. And in fact, it's okay that I walk at my pace, and I don't have to, conform to some preconceived notion that if I'm not jogging and sweating, that I shouldn't even be bothering with this. It's okay to be doing what I'm doing. This is good for me. I like it. It's fresh air. I'm experiencing the birds. And look, there's my neighbor. Hello. This is a nice thing, and I'm happy I'm doing it, right? I mean, I hope that anybody could create that story and make it believable. And what I'm saying is it really, in a sense, it really is that simple. And again, on the flip side, it really is that powerful. That is the power that we have. And if we don't choose to utilize that power, to take advantage of that power, to create our version, our context, our significance, our meaning and value of the movement we are doing, then, well, we're not taking advantage of the God-given power we have. We're creating our body unintentionally, right? We're just letting conventional wisdom dictate and saying, well, it is what it is and there's nothing I can do about it. Now, we can say that. We're allowed to say that, but we don't have to anymore, right?
Yeah, Greg, actually, I love what you just shared, because you just gave me an aha moment. Because, a lot of people, when they think about the law of attraction, because you're known, as the law of attraction science guy,
Yeah.
I was thinking about how this ties to quantum physics, and as you're speaking just there, and a lot of people associate law of attraction with, I want to attract an amazing Mercedes, or a soulmate, or a beautiful house. And people don't often realize, I think, that you can actually apply the same understanding of how the world works to your body, to your physical body. And you've just actually, just with what you just said, made it so obvious why you can. Because everything is just information, and the way that we perceive that information is how it shows up in our actual, in what we can see and touch and all of that. And so when you're creating those new stories about running up a hill or whatever it is, in the book, the first book I read by you, you talked about how you did this with fruits, and I really loved that example, because it's just a really simple, clear example of, you were saying how in the beginning you didn't like eating fruit, and you liked eating pancakes in the morning.
I
So I remember that story every single morning, Greg, now, because I usually have fruit, but I sometimes have these biscuits that I make that are like these granary biscuits. They're quite healthy, but I often remember that story. I think, maybe I should just have fruit. And you speak about how you started telling yourself, okay, even though I don't want to have fruit today, I'm going to have it, and tomorrow I'll give myself the choice of having something else, and you created this habit of eventually getting to the point where you love to eat fruit, and it's become a nice part of the day, step by step. Because the question I wanted to ask you was, if someone's watching this and they're thinking, okay, I'm starting to understand even more now why doing this can actually have a physical change in my body.
Mm-hmm.
How do I, when I've done this before, it hasn't worked, or how do I keep going with it once the initial excitement has worn off? Like, how did you build that as a habit, Greg, of, that reframing of things? Did you do specific things to start being more consistent with it, or did it just naturally come to you? Like, how did that happen?
Yeah, you just, everything you said is just jam-packed with all kinds of cool stuff. And I want to say, first of all, you brought up the other side of the coin in my experience, which is the meaning, the context, the value, the significance that we create in the information called food, in the information called eating things, right? Giving ourselves substance or comfort, or whatever, relieving hunger pains, whatever is motivating us to eat. And I want to say, to not leaving the movement part behind, that the idea that we have the power to create our a meaning, significance, value, context, relevance of our choosing. All of that, we're creating it in a manner that serves us, right? That aligns us with our desired outcomes, and we don't need to worry. If you've read my books, I talk about gradually raising yourself up the emotional guidance scale, which, by the way, is available on my website, and it's in a couple of my books too. It's not something that we have to jump all the way up to joy and ecstatic alignment right overnight, because that's not how our subconscious brain works. Just remember, because you asked about that. How do we stay motivated? How does it become a habit? Keep in mind, one thing is this: if you hear me or anyone else say the power you have is the power to create your own meaning and value about the movement you're doing. I know it's easy to say, what? Come on, that's ridiculous. I'm telling you, I know that there's a very inherent and natural tendency for us to say, well, things just are the way they are. Exercise is hard. I don't like it. It's not enjoyable. That's just the way it is, right? You know what? I cannot not say this. That can all be true for anyone, right? You know what? If that's what you believe, that exercise is hard, that it's not enjoyable, that it's difficult for you to do, that you will physically suffer, and it's challenging, and you're never going to like it, anyone is free to believe that. Now, those are all the stories that we're telling about movement, right? Anyone who says that, that's the story. Those are the stories she is telling about movement, which have given it meaning, value, context, significance, relevance, right? It has created the movement as it exists in her universe. But I will say this: there is no such thing as the way it is. The only thing that's true is things are the way we decide. The meaning, the value, whatever I'm creating, what I'm creating, the movement that I create in Greg's individual universe is how I create it. Movement has no predefined and predetermined meaning and value. We give it that, right? So do not scoff or slough or poo-poo the power of this, unless you just don't want to have beliefs about movement that serve you. In fact, I'll say this, and the same thing applies to eating. My litmus test for my beliefs about movement and about eating are this one litmus test. It's not, you know, did I read it in a diet book, or does this exercise guru recommend it, or would my sister, who's this amazing yoga instructor, would she approve of it? I mean, those are all, there's nothing wrong with those litmus tests, but my litmus test is this: does this belief serve me? That's it. That's the only litmus test I ever have for any story I tell. And if someone is suffering, experiencing displeasure from a displeasing body, I will have to say I find it hard to believe that stories about movement that say, I don't like it, it's hard, it's no fun, I don't want to do it, uh, those stories don't serve that person. I know they didn't serve me. Okay, so then flipping over to the food part, right? And I do want to talk about that. Well, how do we stay with it, and what do we do? Let's apply the very same rules to eating, because we're all going to eat. Well, as far as I know, I eat. I love to eat, and it's fun. Sometimes I eat because I want nourishment. Sometimes I eat because I love the taste of what I'm eating. Let me ask you this. When somebody wants to change their body, just like with movement, Sandy, isn't it almost a guarantee that she's going to hear, well, you have to change your diet. You have to change what you eat, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what is it that most people do? What is it that I've done? I think probably everybody's done this. We say, I gotta eat carrots. I hate carrots. I want to eat French fries, right? That's what I really like. But you know what? I want to eat French fries. That's what I really like. But daggone it, all right, I'm going to eat some carrots because I want to change my body, and that's what I'm supposed to do, and I don't like them, and this is horrible. And then eventually when we stop and go back to our old eating habits or patterns, we say, someone says, well, gosh, Sandy, you should eat celery and carrots and lettuce, and you say, I don't like that stuff, right? It's gross. I don't like that kind of stuff. I like food from McDonald's. I like whatever, all the quote unquote unhealthy stuff and then let me take it a step further, and you tell me if you've ever said this. I know I have. I don't say it very often anymore, but I hear people say it all the time. Now you give me your feedback on this. I cut myself a big slice of chocolate cake, right? Oh my gosh, I really want this for whatever reason, whether it's going to give me emotional comfort or whatever, right? But I really want this, and it tastes good, But before I eat it, I say, oh, I shouldn't eat this. Oh my gosh, this is bad for me. This is going to make me fat. I shouldn't eat this. I shouldn't be eating this. I shouldn't be eating this. I heard people say that out loud. When I'm at a public place and they're serving cake, cake, by the way, is a great. I think society is made possible because of cake. I mean, if you're in a workplace and you say, hey, we're celebrating Greg's birthday down in the break room, and go, I don't like Greg. He's a jerk. We're serving cake. Well, maybe I should go say happy birthday.
Yeah, exactly.
People together, right? Well, when we serve cake publicly, I can almost guarantee that I'm going to hear somebody say something like that. I shouldn't eat this, and then they eat it. Oh my gosh, it makes my skin crawl. I used to say it. That's part of the reason it makes my skin crawl, because I know what that's like to say that and do it anyway. But it also makes my skin crawl because I know how the universe really works, right? So the stories we tell ourselves about food creates the meaning, the value, the context, the significance of it in our lives, just like movement. Now, I'm not suggesting, Sandy, that we can tell a different story about ice cream and eat a gallon a day and we'll be fine. and I've had people respond defensively when I share this with them, and I understand that reaction, right? Oh, that's ridiculous. I can just tell a different story about pie and eat 3 pies and I'll be fine. Here's what I would say to that. The reason why I started eating fruit, what I wrote about in the book, and the reason why I started eating more vegetables, and the reason why I was careful about other types of food that we normally associate with weight gain, things like that, is because I don't know about you, Sandy. I can't truly not believe that eating lots of ice cream is bad for me. I don't care how many better feeling, believable stories I tell. Now, I have absolutely learned to tell better feeling, believable stories about treats like ice cream and cake and pie, so that I actually eat them on a fairly regular basis. I love dessert, and I probably eat dessert at least once or twice a day, and when I choose to do that, I choose to enjoy it and love it, and I do not beat myself up and tell myself I shouldn't be eating this. But I also know that if I ate tons of that stuff, I can't really believe that it will have no effect on my body. Someone may be able to cultivate that belief, but I find that rather difficult to envision. And furthermore, it's not even a goal of mine. The stories that I learned to start telling that are better feeling and believable, like you mentioned, I started telling myself stories about eating fruit instead of pancakes. And when I first started, if you read my book, my first story was, and this was the best feeling, believable story I could come up with. I had an apple, and I'd say, I really want to be eating a pancake right now. But just for this day, just for this morning, I'm going to eat this apple. I'm going to choose to enjoy it as much as I possibly can. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to choose to remember that I'm doing this out of love for my body, and that I'm putting fuel in that I feel good about instead of pancakes, which I didn't feel good about, right? Now, that was a better feeling and believable story. And I just made a commitment to tell myself stories like that every day about the carrots and the lettuce and the fruit. And you know what? Over the course of time, and it didn't take that long, I really have come to prefer those things. My tastes changed. My beliefs about the food changed. All of a sudden, I love fruit. My favorite food in the whole world are mangoes, followed by watermelon. I would live off those things. They're my 2 favorite foods. I would rather eat those things 100 times more than a pancake or a donut. And this isn't what I'm saying. I have authentically lived myself into these new beliefs. Now, obviously, I would guess any dietitian would say, and I'm not a dietitian, but I would think any dietitian would say, well, Greg, fruit is much better for you than donuts and cookies and pancakes, but that's not where my head is today. I would rather eat those things because I truly enjoy them for not just for their taste, but for the love of my body that I'm pouring on myself while I eat them, and how it makes me feel, and it makes me feel good, and I learned, and I did not start out, believe me. I eat French fries probably 4 or 5 times a year, but it's not because I sit around thinking I shouldn't eat French fries. They're bad for me. It's not. It's because when I go into a restaurant, and we don't fix French fries at home, but when I go into a restaurant, it's not one of my favorite foods anymore. I have learned, I have lived my way into different beliefs about food. I've given food new context, significance, relevance, meaning, and value by making a commitment to choose stories that serve me. Even though I started, like I said, I didn't start out saying, oh, I'm so overjoyed to eat this salad, instead of a hamburger. I didn't say that.
Happy dance.
Yeah, I was honest about how I felt from the beginning. I just made a commitment to saying best feeling story possible that's believable, right? And it wasn't believable to say, oh, I don't even like hamburgers and French fries. No, I did, and I still do. I mean, I still do. Don't get me wrong. But I acknowledge that I would really prefer doing that. And if people can give themselves permission to be intentional about the movement and the eating that they are creating in their individual universe, starting where they are, not pie in the sky. Oh, sorry, shouldn't use that analogy. Not, over the rainbow, too good to be true. Can't say. Remember, being an intentional creator is not about always being positive, because I don't feel good about everything that I experience. And always being positive, that's a lie, you know? That's being in denial. If I'm always trying to feel positive about my body, about my movement, about my eating, I don't always feel positive about it. I have found it's incredibly important to be honest. That makes my stories believable when I'm honest, right? So if I'm sitting here and I look at myself and I say, I'm 100 pounds overweight, it's very displeasing. I've suffered a long time. I've beat myself up a long time. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired about this. All right, start where you are, right? Just make a commitment just for today to craft any movement you do, any eating you do. The only stories you're allowed to tell are better feeling, believable stories which serve you. Remember, hear what I'm saying. I'm not saying positive stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can tell a positive story and it's authentic and it's real and it feels real, great. That's wonderful. I have tons of positive stories I can authentically tell about eating and movement today, and I love them, but I didn't start there. The stories I started telling were just better feeling and believable, and I made them believable by acknowledging how I really felt, right?
Excellent. I was about to say something very American there. Awesome, but
Awesome.
I've listened to so many American videos and podcasts. I'm really grateful, Greg, because I consider myself someone that has done a lot of work and looked into this whole issue of how we change our body shape, and it's actually been part of my job as well.
Right.
And I've never seen it in the way you've described, in terms of the movement that we do being information, and the way that we eat food, like you said, context, significance, value, and relevance. That doesn't mean we have to think of those things every time we pick up a piece of cake or an apple, but just suddenly being more aware of, okay, the movement I do is information. It's not just a physical activity. It's literally information. And like, just to wrap things up, like going back to that example of somebody eating a piece of cake and saying out loud, "Oh, I shouldn't be eating this." Right. What you're saying is that, maybe that cake wouldn't actually be that bad for that person. I'm not saying it would be amazing, but maybe it wouldn't actually. We do actually need to eat some amounts of fat. Maybe it wouldn't be that bad, but the person saying this is such a bad thing and putting that information, that context, that significance on it, it probably does actually become bad for the person because they're now seeing it that way. And if you become aware of that and start to see everything like a big hologram, which I think is one of the gifts of understanding quantum physics better, then you're empowered to actually create shifts and changes, and not just aimlessly hope things get better, which is how I used to feel until I had this first sudden realization that I could change my body shape by what I was thinking and not by what I was doing necessarily.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah. Do we have time for me to say one more thing?
Yeah, let's finish with this. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just want to throw this up, right? Here is my eating. Here's my body, right? Here's my movement. Here's my body. They're just pieces of information. We're the ones giving them meaning and value. And I just want to say this, because I had mentioned it before. Usually when we want to change our bodies, we go to somebody to teach us. Whether it's a Weight Watchers program or an exercise video or a gym, class at the YMCA or whatever the case is, we're going to be given instructions, right? We're going to be told, eat these things, don't eat those things. Move this way and do it this many times a week, right? I mean, those are the basic components of changing our body. Do eat, don't eat, move this way, do it this many times, right? Well, here's what happens. And by the way, the same formula is true in almost any kind of how-to book or how-to video. Well, a how-to, diet, weight loss, it follows old science, meaning this. If I want to lose weight, I go to somebody and I do what I'm told. I eat the food I'm told, I don't eat the food I'm told, I move the way I'm told, and I move how often I'm told, right? And the person who's telling me that is, I would bet invariably, in good shape, and it's them, right? So that's why I've chosen them. And B, they're telling me undoubtedly good, positive things to do, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong, I'm sure, with 99% of the movement programs and the dietary programs. You could give somebody very solid, and I'm sure you do give people solid advice about moving your body and eating healthily and all those things, right? But let me say this. The reason that those specific actions, the eating and the movement, worked for that person who created the plan is because she just happened to have beliefs that were aligned with her desired outcomes. It doesn't mean that the actions she took were bad or wrong or incorrect or shouldn't be taught. It doesn't mean that at all. Well, what it does mean is this. If I subscribe to her program and eat the way she tells me and move the way she tells me, I won't get those results unless my beliefs also just happen to be aligned with my desired outcomes, right? We've all experienced this or known people. I go buy the latest exercise video or exercise book or weight loss book. I do exactly what it says, and nothing happens. And then what happens? I beat myself up. I call myself names. I, begin to blow off, that's, those how-to books, those diet books, those things, they're just a bunch of junk. They're just trying to make money. It doesn't work. There's nothing wrong with any, I don't know any, but, a thoughtful, considered eating plan and a movement plan. What quantum physics tells us, what these new paradigms tell us, Sandy, is the best, most thoughtful eating and movement plan can work wonders for us if we intentionally align our beliefs with our desired outcomes before we do it and while we do it. So that's why, the first book I wrote, that book, it really isn't a diet book. When I wrote it, I thought, really, this is a book that you should read before you start a diet program, because anything, I would say almost anything, I don't know about you, I've tried the no carbohydrate stuff, I've tried the all fruit stuff, I've tried the vegetarian stuff. I've found value in all of it. I've enjoyed it. I've experimented with it. I've enjoyed it. I haven't gained weight since I began to use these new paradigms. And I was about 20 pounds overweight. I was uncomfortable with it. It was right after my first son was born. So it's been about 18 years. For the last 18 years, I wear the same pant size I wore in high school. It never deviates. I don't fixate on it very much. I eat what I like. I don't eat things 99% of the time. One rule I have is I don't eat things that I can't feel good about. I can feel good about a bowl of ice cream tonight, but if I get that ice cream out and I think, I shouldn't be eating this, then I don't, right? If I can't feel good about it. But I will say this, I continue to choose my stories. They're stories of my choosing. They're stories that serve me because I choose today to be intentional about how I create everything, about how I assemble this information, right? And it does apply to our bodies, right?
Yeah, and just one really quick question on that, Greg. You're saying you need to have your beliefs aligned with whatever actions you're doing. Otherwise, the actions, even if they've been working for someone else,
Hmm.
if you don't align what's going on here, it won't have the same results for you. So
Right.
for people watching this, I mean, obviously you're talking about beliefs like working on the faith that whatever you're doing will work, or working on the belief that you can change your body shape, or working on the belief that taking this particular exercise program or starting to go running up a hill will help you change your body shape. Do you mean like, is it related to the success of what you're doing, or like other kinds of beliefs like?
All those things you mentioned are beautiful and can become part of, gosh, any sort of, uh, self-evolution and self-empowerment. I would just say this. I would actually make it even simpler. I'll explain it this way. When I talk about aligning, and I also want to be clear, I just to clarify, I choose to align my beliefs with my desired outcomes. Okay? So that's really important. What are my desired outcomes? I'm no longer going to pretend like I don't desire the things I desire. Because let's be honest, when we are displeased with our body and we've suffered for a long time, part of the way we try to minimize that pain is we start telling ourselves, "Oh, I don't really care about having a body I feel good about. That's shallow. That's unimportant. That's only something. You got to be an exercise model, or you got to starve yourself, or So we start pretending like we don't really desire a body that we feel good about. That's painful because those desires don't leave us, as I'm sure you know. So I'll say it this way: if let's say Sandy has a DVD called Get the Body You Want, right? And on your DVD, you have created some incredibly thoughtful and valuable information about eating and movement, right? And you combine the two and you say, just follow my instructions. You're gonna love your body. There's nothing wrong with the information you've put on that DVD, by the way. It's great information. It's valuable information. What I would say is this: as I watch Sandy's DVD and I follow your instructions, I want to be intentional about consciously, intentionally, and deliberately aligning my beliefs about eating with my desire for my body, right? And I want to do the same thing with my beliefs about movement with my desire for my body, right? So that's what I'm getting at. Whatever type of exercise program you follow, or even if you don't follow a specific program, if I am intentional about the eating I'm creating in my universe and the movement I'm creating in my universe, and I start where I am and I keep telling the best feeling, believable story, and the more I practice it, the better feeling the story will get. It'll start to become more and more believable for the story to be better and better feeling over the course of time. But that's what I'm getting at. So I follow Sandy's plan, and I consciously and intentionally align my beliefs about eating and movement while I follow your plan, right?
Hmm. Towards a desired outcome.
Right. My
Yeah,
desired body that I
yeah.
feel good about. And my body may not look like the guy who's on the cover of Men's Health, or it might. It's not really my desire because my belief is I'd have to work really, spend a lot more time in the gym to get that. That's my belief. Personally, I don't have any desire to, you know, move past that belief. Someone else might.
Hmm.
But I will say this: my desire is that I feel good about my body, that it feels good, that it feels good to inhabit this physical, you know, spaceship that my consciousness uses to walk around the planet and experience human life. I like to be able to go out and play basketball with my teenage sons and still beat them, which I can. Not every time, but I can. I like to be able to run and play football and soccer and not be winded. I like to be able to walk up flights of steps and get up to the top and say, I feel good. I don't need to be an elite level athlete or a cover model on a Men's Health magazine, but I want to look in the mirror and say, I like what I see. It pleases me, and I feel good. Even more than liking what I see, I feel good. about this body that I'm inhabiting. That's my
Thank
desired
you.
outcome.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Greg. That just wraps it up really well. Like aligning the two, eating, moving, and just making sure that everything is moving in the same direction, and that like paying attention to your feelings as well. And I think if you haven't read Greg's books about this, then you need to go and do that. They're available on Amazon.com. I actually have the Kindle versions, so you can get them even electronically. And there's the first one which I read, which was Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Fail. And then I think people who want to read more about this particular topic, then the book to look at would be Why Quantum Physicists Do Not Get Fat, because that goes into more detail. So thank you so much, Greg. I've just taken loads of notes, actually, I have to say.
Me too. No, me
So,
too, Sandy. Yeah, I
yeah,
love talking with you. You always have inspired me and educated me throughout our conversations, and that's probably one of the reasons it's so fun for me to have this dialogue. Thank you.
cool. Well, we'll be back with another topic in probably a couple of 2 or 3 weeks' time.
Send us a topic. Send Sandy or me a topic that you want to hear
Yeah,
us take
that's a
on.
great idea, actually. Yeah. And yeah, and if you have any aha moments while watching this video, let us know. We'd love to know. I know I had some, and I know that
Me
if
too.
you paid close attention, then you'll have had some kind of shift, because I could feel it happening for you guys watching. And I had one myself. Just I'd never seen movement in that way. It sounds really stupid now I think about it.
No,
I had
come
always just
on.
seen it as a physical activity. But when you think about it, it is information. It is literally just information. And I can see how that even affected my own body when I was going jogging 3 times a week and nothing was happening. And I would think, oh, this is pointless, because I was going running and my body shape wasn't changing. And can you imagine how many times I thought that? And that's exactly what happened. Nothing changed. And it wasn't until I just started to completely wipe away all my thought patterns that things did change. So that's possible for anyone watching, and it could be a completely different kind of transformation. So thank you so much, Greg, and we'll meet back on Google in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Sandy. Have a great rest of your evening.
You're welcome. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.